I'm Bonnie Erbe. Welcome to the Contrary, a discussion of news and social trends from diverse perspectives. This week, the movie India Sweets and Spices. The movie is about the coming of age of a young Indian American woman, her family, ethnic community, and about women's rights. It opens later this week across the country.
Aunties, all they do is sit around and gossip.
You too. When should we start our wedding shopping, eh?
That's so annoying.
Today in our Women Thought Leaders segment, we have the pleasure of speaking with the movie's writer and director, Geeta Malik, and the star, Sophia Ali. Nice to meet you both. Let's start with Geeta. Geeta, what gave you the idea to write this movie?
It's very much based on my own experiences growing up in Aurora, Colorado, and being dragged to a million dinner parties with my parents as a child. And then, growing a little bit older and becoming a teen and being expected to be a part of these parties, serving food, talking to the aunties and uncles. And so it really started out as just sort of a comedic spin on that. I wanted to satirize our community and poke a little fun at us. And I started writing the script in 2011. I put it away for a long time when I had my kids. I had 2 kids back to back. And then when I came back to it, I realized I had more of a perspective on the grownups in the room. I wanted to learn more about the mothers and the fathers, the aunties and uncles, and what their stories were. And so the coming of age for Alia's character, Sophia, that Sophia plays, sort of came in parallel with the coming of age of her mother, the story of Sheila, and also just of the community and how they sort of break free from these restrictions they had put upon themselves.
And why did you decide to go from comedy to drama? Because it would have been too stinging to the parents who were portrayed as pretty superficial.
Yeah, no, I think the comedy, I hope, still lives in the film. But I didn't want it to just stay at that light stereotypical level. I wanted to start with these caricatures, these stereotypes, this poking fun, and really develop them into, well, why are they that way? I wanted to explore what made them that way. Why did they have these facades up? Why do we see these people behaving the way they do? And so those were the more dramatic elements that came into it a little bit later.
And Sophia, what drew you to take the lead role?
So many things. I relate to Alia in a lot of aspects, just being an outspoken woman, and just kind of a rebel, I guess I would be considered that as well, with my family. But also it feels like an expose, like I'm exposing my family almost for who they are, but like it's not even my story. But I just related to like the gossiping Indian aunties so much, and just the dynamics so much that I was like so excited to get a chance to, and the way that it's told to in this light that's so, it's just light is light. The content of the movie is actually pretty heavy if you think about it. What's happening is it's dark, it's heavy, and it could affect Alia in so much more of a negative way, but she metabolizes it so quickly and then like moves past it and then just learns and observes and is curious about it rather than letting it affect her emotionally for so long and making it heavy,
Then my life was complicated. I want your life to be simple, easy.
That's not what I want. What if we are who we are and then everything changes and we don't recognize ourselves anymore?
And that was another thing that drew me to it. It's just like the lightness of it all and telling it in that way rather than a dark. I mean, it wouldn't be bad. It would just be heavy. Yeah.
And Geeta, tell me, do you think that other immigrant communities have the same cultural thing going on? Is it a story for Americans? My grandparents were immigrants from Eastern Europe. I don't know that they weren't the kind of people who got to be, doctors. We had doctors and lawyers, but in the second generation, not the first generation. Mm-hmm. And so is this a common experience, do you think, for other American immigrants, or is it strictly in Indian?
I think there are things that are specific to being South Asian and Indian. I do feel like what I hope that is also portrayed in this film is that we're not a monolith. There are different kinds, even within Indian society, as you can see with the people who own the shop. There are different levels. There's class that we discuss in the film as well.
Hey Alia, your mom needs you to go to the Indian store to buy some biscuits for the party.
I'm relaxing. I'm looking for some biscuits.
Mom, where are the biscuits?
You're restocking them, Varun.
We're throwing this dinner thing next Saturday. We're new in town. You guys should come.
You sure your parents won't mind?
You invited who?
A local shopkeeper. We are running a charity service, huh?
Sure, Aunties Without Borders.
But I will say for other immigrant communities, maybe it's not necessarily the level of affluence. Maybe it's not necessarily that they can relate to, but the idea of being part of the small insular community, like being in a small town. I feel like that's something that's very universal and very relatable. Whether you come from some small town in Kansas or whether your parents are immigrants from a different country, the auntie experience seems to be a very common thing. And just being scrutinized by a certain generation. I feel like that, and the pressure that kids feel as children of immigrants, I think that is something that a lot of people can relate to, whether they're in it or not.
Definitely that. I know my dad talked about it, but your thoughts, Sophia?
No, I think, yeah, she's right on the money. Just from my own perspective, I think that it doesn't matter what family you come from. You're always going to feel pressure to be someone or something, and that pressure alone is hard. It's enough. It doesn't matter what it is, like be a lawyer or whatever. It doesn't matter. It's just.
But do you think it's unfair to the parents because they're the aunties, because they are portrayed as pretty shallow individuals, most of them?
Yeah, maybe in a way, actually, to think about it that way, because you don't really think about what's behind the mask, like why they are the way that they are, and maybe perceive, like having them so one-dimensional. It's difficult because you're not emotionally connected to them. I mean, it makes them funnier because you can just sort of like shove them aside. But yeah, no, definitely, I think in real life, it affects you so much more because there is that personal connection that you don't really see.
Yeah. And auntie culture is a big thing for a certain generation of Indians and a certain, group that have grown up that way. The stereotypes, they are some truth, and so I hope that in this film, we start with those stereotypes, that we eventually uncover these secrets that they're all holding inside of them too, which is why they're so they're so outlandish. They're covering things up themselves as well.
And do you, why did you focus so much on the women who were not obviously of the generation of women's rights advocates in India so much, and yet they become these suburban housewives when they get to the United States? You would think that once they came here, they would want to enjoy their freedoms.
I don't quite understand your question. So you're saying that the women who were in India were not?
I think that it would be I think I understand sort of what you're getting at, like the idea that they're not then culturally oppressed coming to America. But I think that's what she's trying to portray, is that cultural expectation carries with you when you come to America. It doesn't matter, and she said this earlier in another thing, and I agree. I think when a lot of people migrate to the country, I'm speaking from my perspective, with my family, you sort of take a screenshot or a snapshot of, where you come from, and then apply that to whatever you build, because it's what it's comfortable and familiar.
That's true. But there's also the character of Baravi in this film. So she does carry that same, she doesn't lose herself when she comes to America. Sheila did, because her circumstances were different. She gave up a little bit.
You guys came.
Sheila, is this really you? It's me, Bharvi, Delhi University.
How things have changed since then.
Indeed.
Baravi didn't give up. She didn't give up that integrity of her character and who she was. So again, these are these individual women's stories. And the aunties, we didn't go into all of their backstories, but who knows what they went through in India? Who knows how they came to America? For Sheila in particular, she did give up. She gave up that part of herself, but Baravi didn't. So
Your mother was incredibly brave.
What was this, like a feminist club or something?
Or something.
Parents are full of surprises.
I also think that there's this conception that that like the American society or culture is like very free and you have a lot of things available to you. But I don't think that it necessarily is more than the Indian culture. I think that there's the same amount of opportunities in India, but when an immigrant comes here, holding on to their cultural attributes is not necessarily holding them down. It's actually empowering them in a lot of ways, because they feel that they can still be themselves.
Yeah.
Is it fair to say, I think most Americans would think that women have greater rights in the United States, or at least a much larger percentage of the population in the US has the freedom to become professionals, the free not to be put into an arranged marriage, et cetera, et cetera. Is that
I don't think
what
that's
Indian
oppressive.
Is that how Indian people see it when they come here, or not?
I don't think that would be oppressive. I think that that's just a misunderstanding between cultures, honestly, because I have aunts and uncles who are arranged, and I said this before, like they're some of the best examples of a relationship I've ever had in my life, and they've learned to love each other. So there is something that's beautiful behind an arranged marriage. It's not necessarily oppressive. I think that there are sometimes examples of it, but for the most part, I think that no one feels forced into whatever they believe.
So they see it very differently from how we see it then.
Yeah.
How do you think, Geeta, how the movie is being released currently in the United States and may be released later in India? How do you think Indian and American audiences would view this differently?
Yeah, that's a really good question. We were at a festival recently where there was a gentleman from India, and he was like, I didn't even know this party scene was a thing. Having grown up in India, it wasn't part of that culture. And again, it's part of certain Indians' culture out here in America. But I do feel like, I would assume the Indian Americans would relate to it in a different way. I feel like the audience in India might look at it as, oh, is that what they're doing over there?
I never thought about it like that.
Yeah. I'm not sure. I think, again,
what do Indians think? Yeah, in India.
Yeah. I think, again, the themes are universal and relatable. And, even in Bollywood, the films that they're showing in India, there's a lot of strides taken towards empowerment and towards telling different kinds of stories. And they're not all the same sort of template that they used to be either. So I think there's a great audience for it in India. I think hopefully people will come to it with an open mind and want to see stories about the diaspora as well.
They're going to hate me.
Nah, they're going to love you. There's plenty of Indian women rebels.
Who is this?
But wait a minute. Please, Sophia, tell me your thoughts on that same question. How are Indian and American audiences going to see the film differently?
Man, I never ever thought about that. But I guess I can speak from the perspective of Americans and Indians, like white Americans and American Indians. And I think that like it's really just the same, to be honest. Obviously there's like huge differences culturally, like staple pieces, but as far as like gossiping aunties and expectations and stuff like that, other topics that we touched on during this conversation. Like, I think that any culture can relate to that. My mom's white, it's the same, or American, so it's the same story for her. She grew up with the same expectations, and she's it's so refreshing to watch her watch me explore the world and then like open her mind, from things that have been ingrained so deep inside of her as something that she mistakes for even just like survival, like a survival instinct, a reaction of sorts, like I think about it a lot with racism. A lot of it isn't like even embedded in hate. It's just confusion and what's been told to you for so long and so ingrained that you just don't realize at all what it is. You think that it's just law, that it's true.
But that's exonerating a lot of, that is exonerating a lot of people from, horrible acts that they do from racism, right?
There's obviously there's a lot of hate crimes, and I don't mean to say that racism there isn't hate around it. There definitely are people. I imagine that they would probably be psychopaths or sociopaths or something to actually like actively hate another organization or group or whatever. But I do think that most racism is just embedded subconsciously in ignorance,
Trained from generation to generation too.
Yeah, exactly. And there's
Geeta,
no group that's exonerated of racism either,
Gotcha. Geeta, was Aaliyah's experience, do you think, typical of a lot of young children of immigrants coming back home from their freshman year away at school?
I would say not just children of Indian immigrants, but I would say, there's teens, you go away for your first year of college and you come back and you just think you know everything. I for sure thought I knew what was going on in the world. I'd been an activist. I knew everything. I knew all the solutions. I don't know if it's necessarily true for all Indian kids who go away to college and come back. I know for a certain group, you go away to college and your world is expanded and you are out of this insular community perhaps, or you are away from your parents for the first time. Which happens to kids generally, regardless of what culture you're part of. So, coming back home and seeing things with new eyes, I think is a very universal experience too for kids who go away.
And did you find it sad at all that the spirit of activism was, some might say sucked out, some might say forced out of Aaliyah's mom, both of you?
Yeah. I mean, that was a emotional part for me to write and to direct and to tell that part of the story. That was something, she was so vital and so angry during her youth, and that's the time to do it. That's where all these things begin. And to see that being cut short, that was hard for me. That was a part of her journey that I wish she could have continued.
You kept it a secret. Why would you act like it's something embarrassing?
It's not who I am anymore.
How nice to not have to worry about money.
I'm nothing like these people.
No, you're exactly like these people.
And that's kind of what this movie is about, is, her daughter now kind of taking the lead and saying, Mom, you can go back to that person you were. You didn't have to give that up. She felt at the time, but there's a way to come back to that person.
I think had it been Sheila's story without Alia, just her experience in India and then, marrying Ranjit and then moving to America, it would be so much more sad because you would feel for her so much, but it's like the resolution of it that the story describes. So you get this sense of relief. She gets to experience it again through her daughter, which is so cool, like it's not like a gene that's passed down, activism and feminism, she got that from somewhere, like somewhere subconsciously her mom still holds on to those characteristics, and she passed them to her daughter through her mothering, and now her daughter is the person that she is, and that is beautiful.
What changes did you have to go through to play Alia? What prep did you do? You know, you hear about actors, if they're going to do
I didn't do much prep.
She was very
Honestly, I
method.
didn't do much prep. Yeah, no,
you knew her? You knew her already?
That's what drew me to the script, really. I related to her a lot. Someone called her an antagonist in an interview, and I was like, man, that I feel like that's me. I feel like an antagonist a lot of times with my family. You know, I love them to death, but I feel like I'm almost that way because I love them. Like I just want them. I want them to be aware, and as aware, you know, I want them to make me aware. I want it to be like a mutual awareness situation.
Gotcha. Now, talk to me, Geeta and Sophia, about the differences between producing in Hollywood versus Bollywood. Would this film have been greenlighted in Bollywood?
I never worked in Bollywood, so I don't know. I've only worked out here. I don't know. I think that there are elements of this film where, you know, like I said, Bollywood is changing a lot. There's a lot of new stories being told. And I don't know if it would have been greenlit in the same way. But there are stories like this being told in Bollywood right now as well.
I remember when I was a kid, I watched a movie. I can't remember the name of it. I would butcher it anyway. But this is the premise. Maybe you know it, Geeta. But it's like three guys, and one guy had a one-night stand, and then the girl drops the baby off at his front steps, and then all of a sudden he's like forced to raise this kid. And this is a movie that they made in Bollywood, and it's a comedy. It's not a musical. And they made in Bollywood. It had to have been over 30 years ago for sure. You know, and I watched it growing up, and like that is a very progressive story.
Yeah, there've been progressive stories in Bollywood for a long time, and I think
from there, I feel like
now than ever. Yeah, there used to be parallel cinema where they would do like the art house films versus the blockbusters, same as in America, same as in Hollywood. And now I feel like those stories are sort of trickling a little bit more into mainstream Bollywood as well, which is really nice. Yeah.
Tell me about the two countries. Where do you think it's? I dug a little bit into this, but I want to go deeper. Where is it better? Where do you have more rights as a woman?
Where do you have more rights?
Yeah, better rights. Where are you more?
India and America?
Mm-hmm.
I probably, I mean, I actually, I don't know. I can't really adamantly speak on the laws in India, to be honest.
I mean, I've never lived in India, but where in India, sorry to interrupt. So I meant like where, if you were saying this, like where in India, where in America, there are places in America. I mean, look at Texas. Sorry, Soph.
No, yeah.
Women's rights are
but look at the casting couch. I mean, that's in America.
Right.
I mean, there's places women can't, you know, don't have as many rights as far as birth conception,
control. Yeah, all of that. I mean, so yeah, I think in India as a whole, you know, we hear a lot of, sorry, so what were you saying?
Birth control. Yeah, birth conception. Right.
I think India as a whole definitely has that reputation of not being great for women's rights. And I think that's rightly earned in a lot of ways. I will say that there are very progressive people in India too, who are constantly fighting. And I would say the same about America. There's a lot of very, very regressive policies and politicians and people in America as well. Overall, for women's rights, I am glad I live in California. I'm glad I'm in America. And I do think it's changing, and people are working very hard to change it in India as well.
But I think I personally think that we should move the conversation away from oppression. You know, as far as, because I think that's I don't think women want that. You know what I mean? Like, I think
move the conversation away from what? I'm sorry.
Oppression. Like, I don't think women want to be sold their oppression. Like, I just don't. Like, I think that it's more beneficial if a woman feels empowered wherever she is. You know? And so to say, hey, you're oppressed where you are, you're oppressed in this culture, you're oppressed in everything that you know, change. How is anyone expected to do that? You know, as long as you're being told, like, it's fine, it's good, you still have rights where you are. You have rights. Figure out what they are, and you know, act on them, like, and react that way. Like, you can feel empowered no matter what.
Sure. Okay. Thank you both so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Nice talking to you.
That's it for this edition of To the Contrary. Let's continue the conversation on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and our website, which is www.tothecontrary.org. And if you agree or think to the contrary, please join us next time.
Funding for To the Contrary provided by the E. Rhodes and Leona B. Carpenter Foundation, the Colcom Foundation, and the Charles A. Freoff Foundation. For a transcript or to see an online version of this episode of To the Contrary, please visit our PBS website at pbs.org/To the Contrary.
Be more. PBS.